Greetings, comrades. My name is Gigantools, and there's been an unfortunate trend it's been happening in the self-proclaimed RadTrad movement. Not just recently, but it's been happening for a while now, and it's recently reared its head again. I made a similar video about this a couple of years ago, but for some reason I didn't release it, and it's gonna be an introductory video, this one, to it. I'll probably make a more detailed post about it on my Facebook page, Gigantian Apologetics, and probably a more detailed video about it on my channel as well, which you're obviously watching this on. But the trend that's been happening, the trend that's been gaining some support in some of the RadTrad groups and pages, is this weird idolization of the Spanish General Franco. So for those of you that don't know, during the 1930s in Spain, there was a point in time in which the country was becoming very left-wing and anti-religious. The church and the Catholic heritage of most Spaniards was being infringed upon and discriminated. And in order to oppose this, there were a number of right-wing movements that banded together, and they started the Spanish Civil War. And these were under the leadership, the fighting from the right wing, or the right wing side was under the leadership of the far right traditionalist General Franco. He won the Civil War, and it started the 30-something years of the Franco dictatorship or Franco regime in Spain, in which it proclaimed itself to be like traditional Catholicism, or as Franco called it, national Catholicism. And although it seems to fulfill this image of what it means to be a traditional Catholic country, which many of the RadTrads jumped on the bandwagon and talked about how great it was, the problem with their idolization of it is that they falsely romanticize what was happening in the country, because they'll openly villainize the other side, which is understandable, because the side that they were fighting against, the Republicans, they'll always emphasize the fact that the Republicans were going around and destroying churches and raping nuns and killing priests, which I think they killed. I think during the Spanish Civil War and in the Republican period just before it broke out, 12 out of the 28 bishops in Spain were executed, and a quarter of all the Catholic priests were killed, which is obviously atrocious, don't get me wrong. A lot of these RadTrads too easily endorse Franco, and they willingly overlook the atrocities that he himself committed. This makes him one of the most successful Catholic conmen in history, because he was openly advocating for various Catholic beliefs and strengthening the church, which looks fine from the outside. But when you look at the means that he was trying to achieve it, and some of his policies after he won the Civil War, you begin to realize that he wasn't exactly the most moral of characters. For instance, during World War II, when they started liberating the camps, many of the Allies came across Spanish prisoners of war who had been sent to concentration camps in Europe for liquidation and extermination by Franco. And really their only crime was either being non-Catholic or simply being left-wing. Because in Spain, after Franco won the Civil War, he began a purge and mass censorship of his political opponents. And it wasn't simply targeting prominent leaders on the Republican side of the Civil War. He went so far as to start splitting up families of left-wing individuals from their children, which I think the number stands at over 30,000 families that were affected by this, many of whom never got to see their parents. Many children never got to see their parents again. Many businesses were nationalized and were never returned back to the hands of the original owners. And he also tried to carry out the cultural extermination or cultural genocide of northeastern Spain, where a number of the Republican, which during the Spanish Civil War had a very strong Republican presence. and this includes in regions like the Basque region and Catalonia. General Franco banned their local languages, and he forced people with Catalonian or Basque names to change their names to Spanish names. He forced the renaming of various cities and streets and anything that had a Catalonian or Basque name into a Spanish name. You weren't allowed to be taught the language, and he was just trying to go for the complete extermination of the Basque and Catalan cultures and heritage. The problem I find with the RadTrads is they seem to overlook this. They seem to overlook Franco's treatment of the places where his enemies used to live, and simply praise him as an ideal Catholic leader. And that has major problems. I'm not going to go into the argument that Franco was friends with Hitler, because given Hitler's anti-Catholic stance, it was inevitable that he would have simply invaded Spain and then destroyed Franco, despite him initially supporting him in the Spanish Civil War, which is really a war of convenience and an opportunity for Hitler to test out his weapons, because he'd not only be testing out his weapons, but he would also be removing a possible rise of a communist country in southwest Europe, which could then attack him in the event of a war with France, or if he tried to do anything in the continent. A communist Spain would have been a constant threat to him. But it was inevitable that he would have overthrown Spain anyway. Again, I don't like how the RadTrads are falsely portraying Franco as some sort of hero or ideal Catholic leader, because he really wasn't. And the church, Franco's biggest legacy in Spain, aside from permanently skewing politics forever, so that anyone who claims to be traditionalist is now seen as a neo-Francoist or whatever, because the church took decades to do anything about what Franco had done and was doing to Spain, many of the younger generations in Spain are anti-religious or anti-Catholic. They see the church as not taking a moral stance soon enough, which has implications in itself for politics, hence why it's typically secular parties or non-Catholic parties that now win in Spain. And the church can protest against all the policies that's being pushed forward, but it's unfortunate that if the church had maybe done something sooner to condemn Franco's treatment of minorities and non-Catholics in Spain, then things may have turned out very differently. And I know this probably sounds all very rushed, but again, I assure you there is a huge amount of stuff to cover that I would cover, but I can't because this video is relatively short. Just know that from my research and from the experience of my various Spanish friends and those who live in Catalonian and Basque regions, Franco's biggest legacy has been the undermining of the church in Spain. It may take decades for the church to recover from that, and for Spain to start trusting the church again, but know that the reason why Spain is where it is now is ultimately because of what Franco did to Spain, and how the church's image was twisted by his support of it, and by the church unfortunately not doing enough soon enough. It's kind of similar to how in South Africa the ANC is able to keep in power because it says basically to the majority of the population in South Africa, if you don't vote for us, apartheid will come back. It won't, obviously it won't, but because they're able to keep perpetuating that lie and playing along the horrors of apartheid, they are then able to maintain their control of the country and bleed the country dry in their corruption. Because the ANC isn't anything like it was in the days of Mandela. That's significantly changed. And similar to how apartheid has forever impacted how the politics of South Africa will play out, and how it can be weaponized to keep certain political parties out of power, basically, as long as the foreseeable future, as long as we can see in the foreseeable future. Franco's impact on Spain has forever skewed. Okay, maybe in the foreseeable future, it's skewed how it's forever skewed the image of Catholicism and any conservative or traditional parties. I don't see anything changing unless the church openly says, look, we're sorry for not we're sorry for not intervening sooner for what Franco was doing, or unless one of the far left parties in Spain does something absolutely atrocious, people say, okay, maybe we should avoid going in that direction. But again, the RadTrads, typically in the US, mind you, they overlook all of the atrocities that Franco did when in order to support him, and that in turn really soils their image for the rest of for the Spaniards, who say, why are you supporting this guy? He ruined our country, he ruined our cultures, he twisted the image of the church into effectively a puppet that didn't say anything and was being hypocritical about its support of Franco, yet not criticizing anything immoral he did. And again, I could go into this for hours, but I obviously won't, because this is meant to be a short video. But just know that the RadTrads supporting Franco is not doing anything to help Catholicism in Spain, and Franco was not a moral character. If there are if you have to choose between two evils, one of them being lesser than the other, you don't go for the lesser evil. You don't choose any of those evils, because you don't ever get good from evil. It's one thing if God is going to bring good out of evil, but that's something that's something only he can do. We cannot support an evil party to oppose another evil party. There's a whole philosophy about that, which I'm not going to go into because this video is already going to get quite long. But please note that I'm not saying that my criticism of Franco means that I would have been a Republican myself. No, I wouldn't have supported either side of the war, because both sides were moral. And regardless of what the Republicans did, that does not justify Franco's treatment of them or of the regions that they occupied or ruled or fought over in the Spanish Civil War. And until there's a massive change in how the church presents itself and its actions during the Francoist dictatorship, I don't see Spain's image of the church ever getting cleared up, and until potentially the last few generations that lived during Franco's dictatorship all die. And then only after that will the church maybe start getting some form of a positive light back in the newer generations. But the damage has been done, and we really need to start damage control now, instead of waiting for everyone who hates us to die. That's not an approach we should have, especially if it means that there's entire generations of Spaniards whose souls are in danger because of Franco's image of the church having driven them out. So we need to start working now to clear up the image of the church and realize where the problems were made, and condemning Franco's actions now to make people realize, okay, this is what the church's stance was, this is why it looked like they weren't doing anything, but we can see closer to the edge of Franco's regime, they realized that the problems that their silence had been doing, and they finally started condemning it. So I guess it's like how people think the church supported Hitler because they didn't seem to be doing as much as they could have when Hitler was rising to power, when they were actually doing a huge amount. It's just that a lot of pro-Soviet propaganda was spread around, which seemed to portray the church as not doing anything, and also because the church was doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes to try and protect refugees from Hitler's camps and purges, but they couldn't publicize it at the time because obviously their entire their organizations would have been shut down and they wouldn't have been able to help anyone. But this video is it's been going on for a while now, so I'll just end it. Please note that the RadTrads romanticizing and idolization of Franco is not justified at all, and it's not Catholic. Otherwise, have a good week, all of you. God bless you all. See you in the next video, comrades. Until then.